My name is Mei Chang. I'm really delighted to be with you today and really delighted to be able to speak to so many girls that are thinking about what might be in your future. Chief Innovation Officer is a fairly new role. I think when I got a role with that title at Mercy Corps, there was the first one there and the first one maybe in the global development sector at the time. And I think it's come into existence because innovation has become a bigger and bigger priority for all different kinds of organizations, whether you're a nonprofit or government or a for-profit company, because I think we realize the world is moving faster and faster, the problems are getting bigger and bigger, and what we need to do is innovate to try to find better solutions to the problems that we're trying to tackle. And I think a lot of times people, because it's become so popularized, people misunderstand innovation. And they think of innovation as coming up with some bright, shiny new thing that nobody's ever done before. But what I believe the innovation is more about is that the first step is that invention, the coming up with a new idea. But that's really invention. But there's a lot of inventions out there that are crazy gizmos that nobody ever uses. Innovation is taking an invention and making it practical. So figuring out how to really make it work in the real world, and that means, how is it going to, work in the lives of real people, and also how is it going to get out to as many people as could really benefit from it. And so, innovation really is a process of testing and iterating and improving so that you actually get to something that really solves a problem for all of those who have that problem. So for me, in my career, I started out in the tech sector in Silicon Valley, working at a bunch of software companies, actually software and hardware companies, and some big companies, some small companies, so some startup companies. Some of the names that you might know are Apple, Google, are some of the bigger names that you might know, but I also worked at startup companies you probably never heard of before. And I started out as a software engineer, but then became a manager pretty early in my career. And so was for the most of the time I was in the tech world, in leadership roles related to software engineering. So my last role there was as a senior director for engineering at Google. Where I worked for about 8 years and really got the privilege to get to work on a number of different products, including things like Google, all our mobile products from Google, like Google Maps and YouTube for mobile, if you've ever used anything like that. And then what was interesting is about 10 years ago, I made a big shift in my career where I decided that I decided in my early 20s, I wanted to spend the first half of my career in the private sector and the second half of my career doing something more meaningful, so something that maybe could help make the world a better place. And so about 10 years ago, I made that shift. And have been on a very different journey ever since. I went to work in the US government, in the State Department, then at a big nonprofit called Mercy Corps that works on global development, and then at USAID, which is the US government's foreign aid agency, and we work to help with humanitarian aid and global development around the world, and really around issues of things like global poverty. And so it's been an incredible shift, a very, very different world that I've been working with, going from Silicon Valley into government. And then I've also had the fortune more recently to write a book called Lean Impact that really tries to bring together the things I learned throughout my career to look at how can we learn from the ways that Silicon Valley works that have led to this incredible pace of progress, and bring it to some of the biggest social challenges that we face as a world. I would say that when you're in a senior management role, like at Google and at USAID, I managed teams of about 250 people. So I had managers of managers of managers often reporting to me. And so when you're managing a large team like that, even though Google and the government are very, very different places, one thing that's similar is you end up going to a lot of meetings. So most of my days in both places were booked up from beginning of the day to late in the day with meetings back to back. And that's because in a senior role, my job was not so much to do the work, but to help direct the work of what everybody else was doing and to inspire the work of what everyone else was doing. So in that role, I felt like what was important to me is get everybody heading in the same direction. So have a very clear vision and strategy for what we're going to do. And then really do everything I could to remove roadblocks and give people room to run to really figure out the best way to achieve those common goals that we set ourselves to. And part of that also, especially in the government role, was not only to work with my team, but to work with other teams across government and other organizations outside government, because the kinds of changes that we're trying to make as a government, we're doing things like trying to end global poverty, are not things any one organization can do alone. And so it really, a big part of the role was not only just being responsible for my team, but really trying to help influence the rest of the sector to move forward together. Well, it's a lot of work, which I don't mind, but it is a lot of work. In terms of the biggest challenges, it's been very different in different roles that I've had. Certainly in government, having come from Silicon Valley, things move a lot more slowly, and so having to develop more patience for just the pace of things. That there's reasons that things move more slowly, that we're responsible for taxpayer money, so we have to be very transparent and thoughtful about the process that we use to make decisions. And I think that's a good thing, but it does slow things down a bit. And so it requires some patience too. I think it's also one of the things that maybe people don't always realize is that when you're in a senior management role, even though I go to all those meetings all day, at the end of the day, it's hard for me personally to have anything to show for it, because I'm not doing the work. I'm sort of trying to help the other people who are doing the work. And so you have to be able to gain satisfaction more indirectly from the work that you're doing. But I think the upsides is when you can, over time, start seeing things shift, not only in your own team, but your organization overall and the world overall. And so I've definitely felt like from the time of my work at USAID, where I served as Chief Innovation Officer, that we were able to demonstrate a number of really new ways of working that have been adopted by more and more organizations. I think everyone has their own path, right? We all have our own interests, we have our own strengths and our skills, and so there's no one path that's right for everybody, and that's what makes us as individuals very interesting. For me, I always had an aptitude for math when I was a kid. I did well in math, I loved math, and so I thought when I was young I would want to do something to do with math. And when I was in school, in elementary school anyway, personal computers didn't exist yet. And you guys can probably not all imagine a time when that was the case. But personal computers first came out when I was in junior high school, and I was asked my parents to get me one, and I was able to teach myself how to program and really loved the ability to be able to create things with a computer. And so it was a very natural career path for me. I ended up going to college and studying computer science. Being at that time, it was still pre-web, so it was a very different field at the time, not nearly as glamorous as it is today. And then worked in Silicon Valley at a number of different companies over time. But like I said, it was in my early 20s or mid 20s that I decided that as much as I enjoyed the work in the tech sector, that I did want to do something more meaningful. And I wasn't sure exactly what that would be, but someone that I knew who was at Apple at the time, who was kind of a mentor to me, left a senior role at Apple to move to DC and work for a nonprofit called the Human Rights Campaign. And she went to be the executive director there. It never occurred to me that you could do something like that. And so seeing her do that, it made me, I made the commitment just then like in my mid-20s, that like, when I was halfway through my career, that I wanted to do something similar. And again, I didn't know yet at the time what that would look like exactly, what issues I would want to work on. When I got to that point in my career, I knew that that was a change I wanted to make.